Hey everybody, welcome to DadsDen of Pop Culture and a Catwoman of Nine Tails. What does that mean? Well, what it means is Catwoman was one of the top three Batman villains in the Golden Age. The guy with the most appearances was Joker. Following behind was Penguin and Catwoman. But Catwoman, well, frankly, had more personality and more of a story than the other two. When Joker showed up, it was typically just some sort of, weird comedy prank involved crimes. You did get a little background with the whole Red Hood thing, but he just kind of was episodic. He shows up, he causes some trouble with a themed crime, Batman's got to figure it out. Really the same thing with Penguin. Penguin gets out of jail, says he's going straight, turns out to be a criminal scheme, Batman takes him down. Now, obviously, Catwoman also was hatching schemes, but with Catwoman, you had the Batman-Catwoman romance underneath it, and they actually give you a story with some continuity. Now, this happens over the course of about a decade, but what I wanted to do was go through 9 stories that really show the development of Catwoman, kind of throw in the twist that they used at a certain point, and then, well, we'll talk a little bit about what happened to her after the Golden Age. Well, of course, we're going to start with her first appearance in Batman #1 from March of 1940 in a story just called The Cat, written by Bill Finger, art by Bob Kane. Now, it all starts, again, when she was just called The Cat. She's a jewel thief. She's targeting rich society folks, since, of course, they have all the jewels. Her target in this particular story is the Travers Yacht Party. Batman decides that the best way to foil this potential robbery is for Robin, who, remember, at this point was about 7 or 8 years old, to go undercover as a steward while Batman has another job to do. So Robin kind of thinks that he's going solo on this particular mission. Of course, we get multiple suspects. Who might the thief be? Robin's trying to figure it all out, wants to impress Batman, obviously. Well, a letter is discovered, signed by the Cat, kind of bragging about she's going to steal this necklace. And it's found just before this necklace actually is stolen. Well, the Coast Guard arrives, but they're really gangsters here to steal the necklace. That's already been stolen. Of course, Robin goes into combat against the gangsters, and he ends up having to leap overboard to escape gunfire. Well, Batman eventually shows up, and the gangsters get their butts kicked with a lesson for all the kids out there about crooks really just being a bunch of yellow cowards. But what about the necklace? Well, it winds up being an old woman who has stolen it. An old woman is the Cat. Oh, wait, no. It was a mask. It was a disguise. And so we finally meet the Cat, a very beautiful woman. She hid the jewels kind of up her skirt, and Batman retrieves them. That might sound a little, more intense than it's meant to, but it's kind of what happens there. But what really seals her as a great character, or an important character for the series, is the final panel, where Batman, as Robin's driving the boat, is musing, "Lovely girl, what eyes. Say, mustn't forget I've got a girl named Julie. Oh well, she still had lovely eyes. Maybe I'll bump into her again someday." And we see Robin going, So, don't ever let anybody tell you that the Batman-Catwoman romance thing is something introduced later on in the series. It is there from her first appearance. Now, in Batman #3 from September of 1940, we get The Batman versus the Catwoman, written by Bill Finger, art by Bob Kane. So she's back before you know it. She wouldn't appear, like I said, as often as Joker, but she was a regular villain during the Golden Age. Plus, she's got a costume of sorts now. Maybe not a great one, but, baby steps. So she's becoming a super villain at this point. We get the cat burglar angle here, but really, she just kind of holds this guy up in his penthouse for his jewels, so it's not real cat burglary. Batman goes into action because the police are getting embarrassed by the cat. They can't stop her. And he winds up saving a guy who's getting mugged. And in the process, Batman himself gets knocked out. He wakes up in police handcuffs. Now, remember, at this point in Batman's career, he's still wanted by the police for being a vigilante. Maybe they think he's actually behind some of these crimes. Pretty common trope used back then in movies and stories. But he does manage to escape. All in all, it's not a very successful foray against the cat. Well, her ultimate target in this story is a diamond show, and she infiltrates it as a model. That's her with the blonde hair there. So the emphasis with the character, Jules, she's pretty hot, etc. It's all right there from the beginning. And of course, it's still going strong to this day. And we see her go after the guy who kind of betrays her here. I'll scratch his eyes out. You certainly live up to your name, Cat. So she's still just the cat at this point, even though the story called her Catwoman. And of course, we get the romance angle on this one as well. Batman apologizes that he has to take her in. She tells him not to worry about it. And, thanks for saving her life. She kisses him, and then she pushes him away. And she flees. But Batman just laughs, says, "What a night for romance," while Robin grimaces, since, of course, as we all know, girls have cooties, and you can't be too careful with them. Well, then we see Catwoman wishing that Batman was beside her in the getaway car. What I like here is that we are advancing this story between Batman and Catwoman. We're not just writing an episodic crime tale. They seal this, of course, with the last panel. We saw Batman, talking like that in the first appearance. Now we're seeing the same kind of sentiment from Catwoman. In Batman number 15, from March of 1943, a story called Your Face is Your Fortune. This is written by Jack Schiff, art by Bob Kane. Well, at this point, we've established the cat. We've established her modus operandi. We've established the attraction between her and Batman. So what's next? Well, first, you need to hear the opening on this story. Beneath the dark denim of that stern figure of the night, Batman beats a tender, generous heart, a heart that can be moved by sorrow, that can be merciful to the unfortunate, and that can soften to the whispers of love. Doesn't sound that much like the Batman we oftentimes get in stories nowadays, but he was frankly a much more rounded character in the Golden Age. The story begins with young Elva Barr waking up in the morning and getting ready for work, and this work is at a beauty salon. A salon patronized by wealthy women. Could Elva possibly be? Well, she runs into Bruce Wayne when he judges a beauty pageant for salon workers. He recognizes her immediately, and she starts to fall in love with Bruce Wayne. Now, this puts Batman on Catwoman's tail, so to speak, which lets him unravel the current scheme. Now, when he finally catches her, she tells him that she wishes he'd let her go because her love for Bruce Wayne might help her turn her life around. And Batman goes for it. He has a tender heart. Don't forget that. He lets her go. And now it becomes more of a romance story. Bruce and Elva get engaged. Catwoman tells her gang it's all over. And they tell her she's a fool if she thinks the millionaire playboy is really going to marry her. Now, meanwhile, Bruce's girlfriend, Linda Page, remember it was Julie in the first one. Now it's Linda Page. He went through a couple girlfriends over the years. She's in tears. She decides to go check out the competition, and Elva, recognizing her, decides to disguise herself as Linda so she can ask Bruce if he really loves Elva and is going to marry her. And sure enough, she discovers that the engagement was a trick, and then Bruce finds out that Elva knows it was all a trick. We are in soap opera territory here, folks, with this one. Or maybe we're actually in Wonder Woman territory here. Well, anyhow, they end up figuring out she's going to rob a fancy pet show, and they manage to stop her and her gang. Catwoman sadly gives up to Batman, the one man who always wins. Batman doesn't think she'll ever go straight, and you can see how they worked with this material in the 1966 series. Julie Newmar, Adam West as Catwoman and Batman. But so, again, we're advancing it a little bit more. There's definitely an attraction. Now she has an attraction to Bruce Wayne as well as to Batman. Although Bruce Wayne's kind of killed that one for her. But you can see where this is going. They still emphasize that romance angle. In Batman number 22, April of 1944, The Duped Domestics, written by Al Schwartz, art by Bob Kane and Jerry Robinson. The Duped Domestics here brings Alfred into the picture and continues the crime romance angle of Batman and Catwoman. And keep in mind, Alfred back in the day, first of all, did not raise Bruce Wayne. Alfred comes along much later, and when he first shows up, he's kind of this chubby guy who later thins down and grows the mustache. But Alfred was mostly there for comedy relief back in the day. Again, a character they've changed quite a bit over the years. Well, it begins with Alfred in love, and therefore he's being absent-minded, not being the greatest butler in the world. Continues with Batman and Robin coming across a gang who is mugging a butler. So butlers seem to be at the heart of the whole thing, and more than that, butlers in love are at the heart of the whole thing. Well, obviously, this is a way that Catwoman is going to use to get access to the homes of the wealthy. And we get to see Alfred, trying to romance Catwoman, who's obviously posing as this maid. He claims that he's a friend of Batman's, and she wants to meet the Caped Crusader. So Alfred puts on the costume and poses as Batman. Again, they would do this in the 1966 series as well. They didn't do the storyline, but him, dressing up as Batman. Although I think this actually would have worked really well as an episode of the series. I might do a video someday on the stuff they could have done in the 66 series from the old comics. There's a few things. Well, Alfred ends up being captured by Catwoman, who doesn't know he is a fake Batman right away. Bruce and Dick end up being caught as well. So all three end up in a locked freezer while Catwoman robs a mansion. They escape, though. They turn the tables on Catwoman and her gang, with Alfred making the actual capture. And he also administers a spanking to the Catwoman. So, file that in your canon. At any rate, again, now we have, it doesn't really advance the romance angle a whole lot in this one, just a little bit, but I thought it was an interesting story of how Alfred gets roped into the whole thing. Now, in Batman number 35 from June of 1946, there's a story called 9 Lives, has the Catwoman, written by Bill Finger, art by Bob Kane and Ray Burnley. Well, Catwoman returns in this one in prison. So again, we're kind of advancing the story with her. We're doing different things with the character, not just immediately escape from prison, plans themed crimes, goes at it. It's a little bit more story with Catwoman in these things. Well, the other prisoners are mocking the Princess of Plunder. One guard takes some pity on her, though, allowing her to keep a locket that was given to her by her mother. Gee, what a nice, stupid man. Well, his error is made apparent when she uses the crystal on the locket to hypnotize the prison matron. Naturally, the matron springs Catwoman, so she's free once again to steal jewels and torment Batman. Unfortunately, her gang is tired of losing to Batman, so she needs another plan, something to reinvigorate their confidence in the Catwoman. Two big takeaways. We get a new costume here, so no more of that big cat head thing. But it's not the Golden Age classic costume yet. It's getting there. We also get to meet her pet cat, Hecate. Well, she decides to play on the superstitious Criminal Mind, that same one that Batman plays on, to prove to them she has 9 lives and therefore magical powers, and therefore they should follow her, even though she still always loses to Batman. Well, of course, Batman and Robin are on the case. They figure out that she means to hijack a diamond shipment being transported on a dirigible. So you get a dirigible and an autogyro in this one. Very, very cool stuff. In the course of stopping her, she falls from the dirigible, landing in the water below, thus losing another one of her supposed 9 lives. This sends her on a crime spree with her new gang, and Batman and Robin end up tracking her down to her hideout and winding up in her catacombs, which is another bit they used in the 1966 TV series. Now, this one ends with her apparent death. Now, again, the character is advanced here, though. We get a new costume, so we're getting closer to the Catwoman that we all kind of know and love. More emphasis on the cat identity and the 9 lives. And we get her first pet cat, Hecate. I think it changes at a certain point, but in the Golden Age, it's Hecate. Well, Detective Comics number 122, April of 1947, The Black Cat Crimes, written by Bill Finger, art by Bob Kane and Charles Paris. The cat motif is also apparent in this outing. We get some really great panels in this one. This is probably the pinnacle of Catwoman's Golden Age criminal career. It begins with another prison escape, and now we finally see the classic Golden Age costume. The sexy criminal angle is very apparent in this one. Her crime in this one is extortion. 3 rich men have to pay her $50,000 each, or a black cat will cross their paths and bring them bad luck. Well, the first millionaire ignores her, and he suffers the loss of a fur shipment in a blimp fire at the airport. Happens all the time, folks. Batman and Robin give chase. She escapes in her new kitty car, seemingly the equal of the Batmobile. They do get a slightly altered version of the kitty car into the 1966 series when Eartha Kitt was playing Catwoman. Looks a little different from this and, can't leap over things, but still. Well, the accidents continue, so the third millionaire wants to pay off. But Batman convinces him to hold out under his protection. Now, this one ends up with some great action at the Statue of Liberty, which is established here as being in Gotham Harbor. So either Gotham and New York are right smack dab next to each other, or I don't know. Well, Catwoman gets away from the Statue of Liberty in a helicopter with a captured Robin, and I love this panel. She has him tied up in her hideout, and he's asking her if she's sort of sweet on Batman when she inquires as to whether she hurt him when she dropped this heavy block on top of him. And so, are you kind of sweet on him? Of course not. We're sworn enemies. Yeah, right. Even Robin knows that, but it's that smirk on Robin's face that is just friggin' great. Well, Batman tracks down the hideout, saves Robin, gives chase to Catwoman, who may or may not have plunged into the bay in her kitty car. It's a nice ending, but the next story, I think, is what really makes the Catwoman Golden Age arc interesting. Batman number 62 from December of 1950, The Secret Life of the Catwoman, written by Bill Finger, art by Bob Kane and Lou Sayer Schwartz. Now, this one really advances the story arc of the Catwoman. A new gangster plagues Gotham City. He's called Mr. X, and Catwoman once again escapes from prison. Mr. X, in fact, springs her from prison so she can help him launch a crime spree. He figures she can commit the robberies for him using her knowledge of cats, and he'll take a percentage of the loot. If she refuses, he'll do the robberies anyway, and she'll get nothing. It's not the greatest plot in the world, but let's just move on here. Well, naturally, Batman and Robin get involved. We get this scene where Catwoman saves Batman from death, jeopardizing her own escape. And in fact, the masonry of this collapsing wall knocks her out. When she recovers, we get the twist. Amnesia. Now, I know amnesia is an old trope, but there's a little something extra in this one. Rather than it being Catwoman getting amnesia, we find out that the Catwoman persona was the result of amnesia. Catwoman is really this lady named Selina Kyle, stewardess for Speed Airlines. She fell out of an airplane many years earlier. This panel actually establishes that this takes place in October of 1950, but she falls out as the plane was crashing. She hits her head on a branch, and she lost her memory. And that's when the Catwoman persona was born for her. Batman and Robin try to help her regain her memory as Catwoman. And in the process, she does remember her meeting with Mr. X and his criminal plans. Well, Batman and Commissioner Gordon convince Selina Kyle to continue her masquerade as Catwoman to help them catch Mr. X and make up for her criminal past. She agrees, but in the process, her old gang member, Mousy, discovers this new plan. Well, he gets locked up, but he escapes so he can warn Mr. X. Well, she goes back to the crime spree, and in the process, Batman and Robin are captured, which is all part of the plan. They are taken back to Mr. X, his hideout, in a rural cabin, and all three end up facing sure death at the gangster's hands thanks to Mousy's warning. Well, of course, Batman and Robin escape that sure death, and Batman saves Catwoman from a terrible fate, getting dragged off a cliff by a tractor. In the end, Catwoman officially retires from crime to live out her life as Selina Kyle. Now, this is obviously a big development in the Catwoman story, and something we don't, again, quite get with, say, Joker or Penguin. I think the other interesting thing here is Catwoman clearly had a thing for Batman. It's the reason she saves him. and he obviously had something for her, but this attraction seems to disappear when she just goes back to being normal Selina Kyle. Batman number 65 from June of 1951, Catwoman, Empress of the Underworld, written by Bill Finger, art by Bob Kane, Al Schwartz, and Charles Paris. This story follows up on the last one. Is Catwoman really reformed, or is this all part of a big trick? Batman comics in the Golden Age, like I said, they had more continuity than many other series back then. You know, for example, that big dinosaur in the Batcave, that's from an actual story. The big penny is from a story. There's a whole story about all the different weird costumes Batman had to wear in older adventures. It's actually all right there. So they really show that with this Catwoman series. Here we're continuing an actual storyline. It just wasn't done that much back then. Well, Selina Kyle, now a law-abiding citizen, runs a pet shop in Gotham City. She gets a visit from gangster Whale Morgan and throws him out, saying she'd rather forget about her life of crime. As he leaves, Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson enter to sort of check up on her. Now, naturally, they know she's Catwoman, but she doesn't know that they're Batman and Robin. Well, Batman and Robin end up enmeshed in another big crime spree, and they have to call on Selina's rapport with cats in order to get out of a particular mess. The cat motif of the crimes does kind of, bother the Caped Crusaders, though. Like, could she be involved in this? Well, it also bothers Selina as she begins to wonder if maybe she's committing the crimes, like at night, without knowing it. There's circumstantial evidence to support this. Now, this was actually kind of a trope they used with the Golden Age Two-Face. In his first story, he's cured of being Two-Face. They use plastic surgery. They fix his face. We get a couple additional Two-Face stories, though, where criminals are basically trying to make him think that he's reverted to Two-Face and is committing a bunch of crimes. So it's a trope they used a few times in these Golden Age stories. Well, Whale Morgan comes to see her again. He wants her back in the crime racket as his partner. They become the emperor and empress of crime. And Selina seems to go for it. She embarks on that crime spree with Whale Morgan. And Batman is shook. Well, the dynamic duo finally corner her in a TV studio where she steals this valuable necklace on camera. They end up in a death trap, very similar to the kind of stuff that happened on the old show. And, of course, they escape, just like they did on the old show. But Batman realizes Selina, at this point, was setting Morgan up the whole time. It was not actually a return to the life of crime, but her trying to avoid being framed for the cat crimes that Morgan was committing. So we get this follow-up that continues the Amnesia storyline with Selina Kyle. And again, there's no heat, really, between her and Batman. Like I said, continuity like this is, pretty standard these days in comic books. But it really wasn't as common in the old days, and I think that's why it's notable that they did that, particularly with Catwoman. In Detective Comics number 203, January of 1954, The Crimes of the Catwoman, writer Edmund Hamilton, who, by the way, was the creator of Captain Future, and art by Bob Kane and Charles Paris. Catwoman's life of crime, it turns out, was not quite over. In 1954, after a short absence from the books, she returns in 2 issues of Detective Comics and 1 issue of Batman. And here we're going to look at her January 1954 outing, The Crimes of the Catwoman. It all begins when a newspaper, which was short on news, runs a story about how Batman conquered Catwoman, which kind of annoys Selina Kyle. Later, some crooks invade her pet shop and rib her about her past, and Batman and Robin show up to defend her. Now, this also annoys her. In the old days, when she was Catwoman, they wouldn't dare do that to her. And she didn't need Batman's help to deal with these, the rest of the underworld. This is enough to get her back into a life of crime. She attempts to hit a charity circus at the Gotham Gardens, but Batman manages to lock the safe before the receipts can be stolen. He's captured and brought back to her lair, though, instead of being killed. He wonders why. Well, Catwoman is back, and the heat is back. She goes on committing crimes, including hiding in a giant plastic catfish to infiltrate a millionaire angler's yacht, But Batman has already escaped and is back on the trail. He shows up, foils the crime, but Catwoman escapes to plague them a couple more times in this year. And then she disappears, not to be seen again for over a decade. Catwoman, of course, was not the only Golden Age villain who took a leave of absence. The Riddler made his return to comics in Batman number 171 in April of 1965 in The Remarkable Ruse of the Riddler by Gardner Fox, Sheldon Moldoff, and Joe Giella. It would actually inspire 2 episodes of the Batman TV show that had premiered in January of 1966. It was High Diddle Riddle and Smack in the Middle. And the story actually references Riddler's last appearance back in 1948. Well, Catwoman made her first appearance on the TV show, played, of course, by the incredible Julie Newmar, in The Perfect Crime and Better Luck Next Time on March 16th, 1966. She was reintroduced into the comics in Catwoman's Black Magic, also a 2-part story by writer Leo Dorfman, art by Kurt Schaffenberger, in, of all things, Superman's girlfriend, Lois Lane, number 70, with a cover date of November of 1966. The story involves a new bird sanctuary in Metropolis, the Penguin escaping jail, and Catwoman hypnotizing Lois Lane into thinking that she is the Catwoman. We get another costume here. This would be the first, I guess, Silver Age costume when you get down to it. And it kind of blends the Golden Age look with Julie Newmar's cat suit from the TV show. Well, the Princess of Plunder would finally make a Bat Book appearance in Detective Comics number 369 in November of 1967, and a month later in Batman number 197 in December. She was finally back, she was going to stay back, and she was going to remain one of Batman's most engaging foes. The romance angle was back in the whole thing. That is the story of Golden Age Catwoman. And again, with Batman books, Golden Age to Silver Age, it's not as divided as you might think. They kind of blend into one another. But what we get with her is this interesting storyline of her showing up as the Cat, eventually taking on the Catwoman identity, several clashes, obvious heat between the two of them, and then the amazing Amnesia angle that they used. And that's really what introduces her as Selina Kyle. So Selina Kyle herself, that persona, was never a jewel thief. That was something she did while she was under the influence of amnesia, but she becomes a jewel thief when she kind of gets tired of the domestic life. It reminded me just a little bit of Bell Book and Candle, with Kim Novak being this witch who has to give up her powers. A little similar idea. She didn't like being domesticated. She goes back to crime. When she goes back to crime, the heat between her and Batman is back. So Batman very specifically has a thing for Catwoman. And Catwoman has a thing for Batman. It's outside the normal identities, not quite as much. That, folks, is the story arc, the Golden Age story arc of the Catwoman, a kind of a unique thing in Golden Age comics. I hope you enjoyed this little look at it. Let me know in the comments what you think of this little story of the Catwoman. I'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this little retrospective, please give it a like, subscribe, maybe share with friends. That would be very cool. But until next time, God bless everybody. Please be kind to one another. Have a little bit of fun out there. Read some Catwoman comics. And I will see you hopefully again soon in Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Bye-bye.